Welcome to Chalk Talk, Danville Public Schools weekly news magazine. I'm Diane Locker, your host. We've reached that time of year for those of you, the students out there and the parents out there that are thinking about going to college. You have to think about, where am I going to go? How am I going to pay for it? Our show today is all about one of those avenues that will allow you to pay for it. I'm at the Minnie Maude Charitable Trust office, and I'm here with Fred Webb. And we are going to be talking about deadlines and how you apply for that money for that college education. And Fred, welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having us again.
And I think we said a little bit earlier, this is year number 8 that we have been talking to the community about the Charitable Trust.
That's correct.
And I like to every year start out the same way, because one of the things that I think is so unique about this organization, this trust, is that this is an example of a local individual that spent his life in our area, and after he passed away, he had it set up so that everything went back to the community. You're an organization that gives scholarships, but you also give to organizations around here that are doing things. When I say looking at that history, when I say J.T. Minnie Maude, J.T. was, I believe, your uncle.
That's right.
Minnie Maude is actually J.T.'s mother.
That's right.
And of course, both have passed on. But let's talk a little bit about J.T. J.T.'s mother, J.T. was very devoted to his mother, and I think looked after her entire life. J.T. started out with very little. And how did he become this individual that's able to fund organizations such as this?
Yeah, JT was born in 1922 in the Schoolfield section of Danville on Park Avenue. And his dad lost his job in the cotton mill in 1930. And they decided to become tobacco farmers. So they moved to a rented farm in Caswell County. And they operated on the farm until the mid-40s, but never owned a farm. They always rented farms. And James's oldest brother, James was the third of 8 kids. His oldest brother died in 1939. His dad died in 1940, 8 months after his brother, and had been sick for some time. So Maude basically ran the farm with their older boys.
Now, how old would JT have been when his father passed away, approximately?
40, he'd been just 17.
17, okay.
About 17 years old.
All right. So now, that kind of leaves JT to look after his mother.
With an older brother that was still living, his brother Lawson. They worked the farm, tobacco, like I said, some years the cost of growing tobacco didn't really barely cover what they got from selling the tobacco.
And you
so
said
they raised most of what they ate, whether they grew crops or had livestock. Would
you classify that as sharecropping, because he did not own the farm?
To an extent, yes. And it's a good way of putting it. There was a couple of people here in Danville that actually owned the farms, and they paid a portion of what they sold the tobacco for as rent.
But now he ended up going to college.
Utilizing the GI Bill after he got out of World War II, he was in the Army Air Corps and utilized the GI Bill to go to the VPI extension here in Danville, and then went on to the University of Alabama and got a degree in industrial engineering.
What happens after that?
He got a job in South Carolina, first with Honeywell. He sold instruments, thermostats and stuff. And in the late 50s, he was introduced to the stock market.
And a good time.
That became one of his passions in life. And it's where he really made his money. I mean, he made a good living as an industrial engineer, but he made the kind of money he left us through the stock market.
And I think I've asked you this before. He was employed his entire life. I mean, from working in tobacco to other things that he did later on in life. But I think in years past, you and I have talked about this. The money was actually made in the stock market.
To give you an example of how hard he had it and where he got to, his very first job as a teenager was working for an electronics shop here in Danville. He worked 60 hours a week for $8.
That's amazing.
And he left the trust $50 million when he passed away.
big difference between $8 and 50 million.
I mean,
Big
$8 a week for 60 hours. I mean, that's a far cry.
But one of the reasons that I'm always asking you to talk about the history, and you'd think after 8 years, you think everybody knows the history, but it's to me, it's the classic story of starting with nothing and really making it. And then after JT made it, JT, from what I remember now, from our past conversations, he was pretty much a giver all of his life to his family.
And friends.
And his extended family. Talk a little bit about that type, because he was doing that before the Charitable Trust was ever set up.
Exactly. I know as a young man or a young boy going to school, if you got good grades and for your report card, A's and B's, he sends you $10, $20 in the mail.
And then we've talked in the past, that $10, $20 was pretty good back then.
Hey, look, in 1972 when I was 12 years old, I got a $20 bill. I was rich.
It's changed a little bit. But that was just an example. But he not only did that for you, he did it for the entire extended family, didn't he?
Yes, for anyone else who got there. He helped a few kids with college expenses. Not paying for the whole thing, but just kind of helping them over the hump from time to time. And he always felt like though an education did not guarantee you success, it gave you the ability to compete.
And I would think that his life experiences taught him that. I mean, started from where he started, and then through the GI Bill, going to college and seeing what that did for him, that he sees the value in it.
That, and also taking advantages of opportunities. Not necessarily that you take every opportunity that comes your way, but do you evaluate opportunities? And not everyone's going to pan out.
But
so
it's
many
also
young people today just don't even recognize an opportunity when it comes their way.
But to me, it's recognizing opportunities, but it's also having the nerve and the gumption to take a chance. And that's what he did. Anyone that made the money he made in the stock market had to have.
He had his share of failures as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he learned from those, just as most very successful people have done. They learn from what didn't work.
When was the Charitable Trust set up? Did he set that up before he passed away? How was that? I mean, where
it was
did it
part
come
of his will.
Okay.
So it took us a couple of years to settle his estate. He died in 2005. And we formed the trust in August of 2007 and came public in October of 2007.
What do you mean by public?
We didn't announce. We had to do the paperwork to get the trust open in August. And it took us about 6 weeks to get how we wanted things to operate. Write our rules for our scholarship program, write our rules for the grant process. And then that's when we made our public announcement that we were open in early October of 2007.
When you look at JT and his life, and you look beyond his life, the reach, not unless the Charitable Trust, that's one thing that keeps reaching for the past 8 years out into the community. He also, it is set up so that members of the family are the ones that are running this. Is this correct?
Most of our trustees are family members, and the staff has family connections.
So, I mean, I think that's a good thing, because you have got to care. You've got to care where the funds are going, let's say more so than someone that comes in and is just sitting there but doesn't have that background with JT.
I mean, we try every day to make sure that we're making him as proud as we can with what we do.
That's a great way that's what I mean. He's part of your family, and you want to honestly carry out his wishes. Let me say, I've never seen this before, and it's one of your things that you hand out, and it says, and I think it's a perfect question, what is JT Minnie Maude?
We do 50 to 75% of what we pay out each year has to be in the form of higher education scholarships. And we do...
Higher education being?
After high school.
Okay.
We do 2 programs, traditional scholarships and non-traditional scholarships. Traditionals would be kids leaving directly from high school going to college. You're already in college, but you left directly from high school. Non-traditionals are young people going straight from an undergraduate degree to a postgraduate degree, or older adults, say like myself, who for whatever reason needs to go back to school.
Now you also do grants. Let's take a break right now, and when we come back from the break, I want to get into the traditional, the non-traditional, and what the grants are too.
Okay.
To individuals. Be sure to come back after the break, and we're going to go into that part of our show that's the most important to you and the students out there, so that we will be talking about how you qualify and when you qualify. So be sure to come back after the break.
Having devices in my classroom helps foster an engaging atmosphere for my students. They're having to get a topic, research the topic, and then create an assignment using that topic. The students are more engaged on the devices because they're having to work in a collaborative group. They're having to research a topic and then create something for that assignment. Danville Public Schools wants our students to be on the cutting edge of technology as we prepare our students for an ever-changing economy.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're at the JT Minnie Maude Charitable Trust office, and we're here to talk about scholarships, grants, things that will help you and your students make it to college. I'm with Fred Webb, and Fred, before we start talking about some of those scholarships and deadlines and that type of thing, I want to go back to JT for just a moment. During the break, I'm looking around the office, and I see that JT also enjoyed himself. He was quite a golfer, wasn't he?
He was indeed. In fact, he learned to play golf on a bet that he lost. And it was when he was at the University of Alabama. A friend of his played golf, and James used to kid him that it was a sissy game. And then the guy got tired of it and challenged James to hit one of 3 golf balls at least 100 yards. And bet him $10.
You don't fool around with money with JT, do you?
In 1949, 1950, $10 to a young man like James was the world. And he couldn't do it. And the challenge and the embarrassment of not being able to do it, he learned to play golf in a very short period of time. He dedicated an awful lot of time to doing it.
But it's good to know that while he was a very dedicated man, he also had things that he enjoyed doing. Minnie Maude. Now, Minnie Maude is part of the title of the trust. She had to have had a great influence on him.
Very much so. James never married. He never had any kids. So he was always really close to his mom. And she really taught all of her kids the benefits of hard work in managing your money. Because they never had a whole lot, so you had to. She always said, if you take care of your pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves.
And that's the truth. Still is. Still true.
So, and he, even when he didn't live in Danville and worked outside of town, he always remained close and would call her.
Now she, even when he wasn't in Danville, she lived in Danville.
She lived in Danville. She moved back to Danville, I think, in 1946, 47, and ran a stand at the local curb market. She was a grocer and ran it until the early 60s. So, yeah, she spent from like 46, 47 until her death in 88.
Let's talk about the different types of scholarships. And I want to start off with, let's say I am a traditional student. And I believe you said a traditional student is, I'm a senior at George Washington or Galileo this year, and I'm getting ready for college. Is that a good definition of a traditional student?
That is correct. A senior, where our scholarship program is open now, and we have an April 1st deadline date. We have a 2-part application. Part of it's online, part of it is paper.
Let me say one thing about your applications, and correct me if this is not a true statement. Many scholarships depend on income, the income of your family, or whether you can afford to go to school or not. I do not believe that is part of your application.
It is part, but it's not the overriding part.
Okay.
We look at 3 different things within our scholarship application. We look at academics, we look at financial need, and we look at student character. Part of the paperwork that you send us is your parents' tax return. You have to write an essay. You have to write get a recommendation letter. You have to fill out an activities form. Those 3 things make up the student character piece. Then we get a transcript, and that kind of covers the academic part.
Would that be true of non-traditional students also?
We do look at all three of those as well.
Okay, so academics plays a role.
Very much so. In fact, I would say that half of our scholarships are probably more academic based than financial need based. Financial need is a component, but we've had students whose parents could afford to send more than one child to school in a given year, and we still gave them scholarships because the kids were good students and good people.
I remember from some in past years, and I hope this is a correct statement, you also look at these applicants as what they will offer in the future, what they can offer to the community, what they can offer just to the good of.
Well, we look at it not necessarily from our community, but as far as the citizenry of the United States
Yes.
in general. One of the requirements, you have to be a U.S. citizen, as well as be a resident of one of our 5 counties for at least 12 months when you submit your application. But as long as you go to an accredited school, whether it be a trade school or a university or a community college, we're not overly concerned with where you go afterwards. We would love for you to come back to this area and help this area become what it can be. But we do not require that you come back to this area.
What would be, for let's say a traditional student now, what would be the top scholarship that you've ever given?
The largest scholarship we have given was $7,500 for a particular year.
That's
Now,
a one-year scholarship.
The student did not get that the first year they applied. That is correct. The most we've given one individual so far was $36,000 to a young man who graduated medical school. And he, like I said, his last year he received $7,500 to go to school, but he didn't get the $7,500 the very first year.
If I get a scholarship from you this year, I'm going to go to Virginia Tech. All right, I go through my freshman year. My sophomore year comes up.
You do a renewal application.
I don't go through the whole process
Not
again.
through the whole process. You still have to do the online application. We need a transcript. We need your parents' tax return, and there's a checklist. So as long as you've maintained your grades, done your renewal application, we also require 20 hours of community service during the year you received the scholarship. Not prior to the scholarship, but during the year you received it.
So if I apply for a renewal as a sophomore, you want that 20 hours to be part of my freshman year.
That's correct. And it can be done at school. It can be done in your community. It can be done elsewhere. There's only a few exclusions we have from volunteer hours.
If I'm going to be at Virginia Tech for 4 years, can I reapply each one of those 4 years?
Each one of those years. We'll do a maximum of 4 years of undergraduate work and a maximum of 4 years for postgraduate work.
All right. There was another classification, that's traditional, the non-traditional student. Now, I'm talking about myself. You've given me a grant. I've renewed it for 4 years, but I'm going to graduate school. Can I turn around and apply for a non-traditional grant?
That's right. The only difference, if we've done a traditional student for 4 years, and they're going straight from an undergraduate program to a graduate program, they would not be considered a renewal that 5th year.
But I could apply again.
You could apply again, but you'd have to go through the whole process and go back into the applicant pool. But you could get up to 4 years of postgraduate funding.
So this brings us into talking about what we call a non-traditional student. Now, one type of non-traditional is what we just talked about, and that's somebody that goes through 4 years of college, wants to go on to some type of graduate school, and they apply. But I remember you, a little bit earlier in the show, we talked about non-traditional students could be me, out of school for years, and maybe I'm out of work, so I'm going back for training.
That's right. To give an example, years ago when Dan River closed up, an awful lot of those workers had to go back and get some retraining. And that's we would consider them non-traditional students as well. If a situation like that occurred here, they could apply to us and we would see if we could help them out going to school.
I think it's very important that the community hear that, because I think we all know are kind of familiar with scholarships for students that are in school getting ready to go away to the university. But we don't necessarily think of this that you've been out for years and you want to go back. So this is a venue for those people.
Exactly, and we're one of the few in the area that do non-traditional students.
What's the deadline for traditional students to apply this year?
This year is April 1st. It has to be in our office or clearly postmarked. The post office doesn't always postmark mail. So if we receive it on April 3rd without a postmark, then it's late. So if you're going to mail it late in the process, walk it into the post office and have the clerk stamp it.
And I want to make this point because I remember when we first started and the trust first started, you were a little more lenient on postmarks and you know, do you have all the information in? But you've grown to the point now that you do not have time to say, you forgot to put this in, you forgot to fill out the online part, you forgot to do this.
Exactly.
You either do it by that April the 1st deadline or you're out of it.
We lose 100 students a year because they don't do complete applications. They never have a chance because they only do one part of the application or they don't send all the paperwork in on time.
So it's important for those people in the community and those students out there applying to know that there are no second chances here.
Well, for that particular year,
yes.
You can always apply
yes,
the following
yes,
year.
but I mean,
but in that particular year, if it's not complete,
no one's going to call you up and say, "Hey, honey,
you
need to do this."
Now,
this
if you
this.
walk it in the door and ask us to check the application over, we will to make certain you have it.
Sounds like
there.
that'd be a safe bet for you.
It would be.
Traditional students, non-traditional students, but you have another thing that you do. I see when I'm riding around Danville, I see sometimes funded by the JT Minnie Maude Charitable Trust. That's a whole different thing from scholarships, isn't it?
It is. 25 to 50% of what we pay out each year goes towards charitable grants. In our history, we're just about 50-50 between scholarships and grants. We've done about $6 million in both. We have, to give an example, we'll end up with about $600,000 in the new Y.
Okay.
Down the river. We've got probably $400,000 in the Ag Center north of Chatham, as well as other programs. We sponsor the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers and Big Sisters with different programs. We've helped the museum from time to time over the years. The list goes on and on. God's Storehouse feeding program.
It's just amazing to hear you talk about these different things. You're not only helping students and helping adults that want to go back to school, you're doing many things that raises the quality of life in our city.
We hope that we are. We're giving those folks the opportunity to get it done. We normally, anytime we have an opportunity to talk about JT Minnie Maude, we try to share the information about the Community Foundation of the Dan River region has scholarships available. Much tighter deadline, February 27th, I think, this year. The Hughes Memorial Foundation, their scholarship deadline is the same as ours, April 1st. And it is always worth the small amount of time it takes to fill out the Tobacco Commission scholarship application.
Let me ask you something kind of off the mark here. You just talked about all these different organizations that are doing somewhat the same thing that you're doing. Do you get together and discuss these things?
We try to help each other out whenever we do a presentation to let everybody know that there's money available. But no, we don't collude or anything about, well, you funded this particular person, so we won't. Okay. Now, having said that, we require a financial aid worksheet from the school you're going to. And if you're going to be overfunded,
oh yeah.
To give an example, if you're going to go to DCC and you have a full Pell Grant of $5,600, and we calculate tuition fees and books somewhere around $4,600, $4,800, we're not going to give you any money. Because in other words, your cost is covered.
We're going to pay for you, help you go to school, but we're not going to help you make a profit out of it.
Right.
In the few minutes that we have left, what would you like to emphasize to the community about the grants? We have talked about the deadline, the importance of doing everything that you want done. We have your contact numbers on the screen. We have your website on the screen. What is it that you would like to say to the community?
If you have any questions about the application, the due dates, what you need to do to complete it, give us a call, come by and talk to us. We're more than willing to help you out in getting a complete application in. About 65 to 70% of the students who make it to our trustees in the last 3 years have received some funding. Now that percentage, of course, would go down if the 100 that we lose a year stayed in. But I can't emphasize enough that it's got to be complete or you don't have a chance.
I want to thank you for spending time with me on this 8th year. I'm glad you're still here and giving that money away. And I want to emphasize to the community everything that Fred Webb has said to you today about how important that deadline is. But more important than that is you can make the deadline and forget to do some of the parts that you need to do, and it's not going to work. No one's going to call you up. Be sure you meet the deadline and you have everything in that. I want to thank you for spending time with us and want to welcome you back next week to find out what we're doing here in Danville Public Schools.